So today I wanted to speak about taking responsibility and how that can kind of show up in our lives and what it kind of means, because I believe that truly many of us are going through life giving away our power. We are not taking responsibility for things that ultimately we could do, and we can take control back of our lives. So many of us, sometimes for the whole of our life, are giving away our power, and we're becoming the victim of external circumstances. So we're letting the world externally control how we're living our life instead of internally taking control by taking responsibility and actually creating the life that you want, the life that feels happy to you, and also not falling a victim, not falling prey to our external circumstances, because every single person at some point in their lives will face some type of hardship. That is just a natural way of life, because life is pain and life is tough and life can be super hard sometimes. You know, we have people who pass away, we have to deal with grief, we have breakups, you lose your job, you know, financial stresses. There's so many different things that can happen, and so at one point everyone faces these things. You know, we're all human, we all suffer with these emotions, we all go through these dark times. But I think that many of us, we are also sometimes creating this suffering for ourselves because we're also not taking responsibility to move forward from these situations. And I've definitely done this in the past, I've done this myself. This is why I want to speak about it, because taking responsibility is so empowering. It's such an empowering way to live your life, because you're then starting to take control. Responsibility can have so many negative connotations with it. Sometimes by saying take responsibility, it can feel very personal and it can feel very kind of like something you don't want to hear. But ultimately, one of life's truest lessons is that the only person who can save you or control your life is you. And sometimes, you know, we can say this and it can logically we can understand that, but when you truly understand this, like on an emotional level, then you can start to truly empower your life the way you want to. And I'm going to give you some backstory for me. When I was a teenager, when I was around 15, I went through very, very hard times. I went through lots and lots of depression, lots and lots of anxiety, and I ended up in hospital. I ended up being sectioned. And overall, I actually stayed in hospital for 4 years, which is a massive amount of time. And it was continuous. It wasn't like, you know, I had breaks and I was in and out. Looking back now, you know, I was super young and like, I didn't truly understand what was truly happening to me. I was just really deep into my emotion. There was so many times where, you know, I was put on medication, but then I didn't want to continue to take the medication. So the medication actually started to work. It actually started to make me feel better, but then I stopped taking it. And I think it was this, you know, it was this kind of self-sabotage thing, because I didn't feel like I didn't deserve to feel better. And looking back now, I can see those kind of blind spots, but at the time, you know, I'm young, I'm emotionally immature, and also I just don't think I was ready to get better. I kept essentially taking myself off medication, and I deteriorate again and then go back on medication. And it was just a loop. When I look back, like, I can see how I really, really just wanted someone to save me. Like, I really did. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. When you're going through hard times and when you're going through tough times, it feels like you're the only person going through that. It really does feel like you're the only one suffering with this, and you're looking around at other people and it feels like you're so alone. And you just want someone to come and save you, like someone to be able to make it all better for you. For me, honestly, like it's one of the hardest truths to learn, like a hard to swallow pill, you know, those things that are like, one of the lessons you'll learn in life is that literally nobody is coming to save you. Nobody is going to make those decisions for you. Nobody can look after you the way you can look after yourself. Because I was on a teenager ward, it's just this known thing that if you turn 18, you know, you might have to be transferred to an adult ward. And I had seen so many times over and over how so many people my age, they weren't getting better, and ultimately what happened is that they then had to got sent to adult wards. And when you're an adult, like, the system is so bad because there's so many crises, it's so over bared with how many people need help. There's no money in the system, and so ultimately when you're adult, it gets stuck in the system. That's what happens to people. I remember when I turned 18, I remember actually feeling this sense of like responsibility, where it was like, if I don't take my medication now, I just saw like the future of like, I could essentially be one of those people that gets stuck in the system. It really made me be like, I actually need to take my medication, and honestly that is what actually made me take my medication, because I was so scared. I really didn't want to get stuck in the system. That's just not a life to live. And like, that was a really valuable lesson to me. You're the only person that can help yourself. It's super easy to fall into a victim mindset. Like, when we're going through hardships and when we're going through struggles, it's so hard to not, be engulfed in that. Like, it feels like the world's against you, and it feels like everything's happening to you, and it feels like, everything's so unfair and life is hard. And 100%, that is, like, it is hard, it's so tough. But there comes a point where we can't stay in that victim mindset, because if we do, what happens is we are giving all the power to the external circumstances that are happening to us, and we therefore lose control of actually the things we can control. Because in most cases, there is something we can do. In any situation, there is something we can do to make it better. And that doesn't mean that it's easy to do. However, it does mean that there is something in our control that we can do. I do think there is space to be a victim sometimes, and there is space to feel sorry, because yeah, life is tough. You can't always just be like, I can do this, and sometimes struggle is going to come. However, you also need to know when it is time to pull yourself together, to pull yourself out of that, to make the situation better. I remember I used to work in this restaurant, and honestly, it was the toughest job I've ever had. Like, it was a very high-end restaurant, and it was just crazy. And I remember so many people that worked there were so unhappy. I was on a 40-hour contract week, and so many of the supervisors, they would literally come in day after day and say how like they hated their lives. They would be in a mood, they would take it out on you. They were just like miserable, honestly miserable. They constantly said how much they felt like they didn't have a life outside of work because they were just constantly overworking. And I said to one of them one time, I was like, when they ask you to do overtime, do you say no? And they were like, no, I say yes. I was like, but why are you saying yes then, if you literally feel like so tired and everything? And they were like, well, I need to, because I need to look good, it needs to look good for the managers, and all of these kind of things that they were coming up with. And like, they would complain all the time. But the thing is, they have a choice. They actually do have a choice to actually take control back if they just made different decisions. One week I got put on a 45-hour contract, and I went up to my supervisor and I said to him, hey, I was like, I only do 40 hours here, and I was like, I'm really sorry, but I've got put on a 45-hour contract and I just can't do that. And he was like, well, Heather, we're understaffed and you need to do it. And let me just say, I'm not a tight person. Like, I really will help where I can. So I said to him, I was like, with all due respect, and I really don't mean this disrespectfully, but actually it's not my responsibility that the business doesn't have staff. And how I saw it in my head was that this business also didn't treat their staff well. So lots of staff were leaving all the time. I'm not going to be the person taking responsibility for their lack of staff. So I said to him, it's not my responsibility, and I have signed a 40-hour week contract. So, that is what I expect to do. And like, after that, he changed my contract. But ultimately, if I was to say yes and do all these things constantly that I didn't want, I would be unhappy. I would be drained to the point where I'm not looking after my physical health. I'm not taking time for my mental health. We have so much more control than we realize. There's so many people who are saying they're overworked. There's so many people who are saying that their bosses put this on them, their bosses put that on them. But then when you ask them, have you said no? And they say no. They haven't said no. They haven't said, sorry, I can't do this. And so we're giving away our power by doing this. Like, you have the choice. You have the option to say no. You have the option to be like, actually, I can't do that. The reason I said, sorry, no, I can't do 45 hours is because I know that the only person that's going to look out for my health and my happiness is me. We're not actually realizing that in most situations, we have a part to play in this role. Whatever we're unhappy with, we have a part to play. This is one of the things that I would really encourage you to do in learning how to take responsibility. And this is something I'm still learning 100% every day. One good question to ask yourself in any situation is, what part do I have to play in this? And how could I stop this from happening next time? What could I say or do to stop this from happening next time? Because, you know, so many of us are in relationships, we're in friendships, and we're unhappy with how someone's talking to us. But in most cases, you ask that person, have you communicated this to your friend or your partner? And they'll be like, no. And so that's where we're lacking our responsibility. You have the option to actually make this situation better. And so by asking yourself, what part do I have to play in this? You reflect on your actions and what you're doing. I can guarantee if those waiters, you know, they're complaining about how they hate their lives every day, but think if they sat down and thought to themselves, what part do I have to play in this? Well, I'm saying yes to every single overtime shift. So ultimately, I'm the one causing this, you know, I'm the one causing this suffering because I'm not taking control of the situation when I have that choice to. I think one important distinction is not to equate responsibility with fault. Sometimes people do things to us, sometimes people hurt us, and that's not your responsibility that has happened to you. However, unfortunately, whatever happens afterwards is your responsibility because it's only your life. Like, no one else can do anything else for you but you. And maybe that will mean getting help. Responsibility doesn't mean you have to be alone. Sometimes responsibility can mean reaching out and making that step to get help. So we need to take responsibility to communicate properly. We need to take responsibility to, when someone says something that we don't like, we communicate that properly so that that friendship will then develop in a healthy way. You're not building resentment. And again, with our work life, you know, taking responsibility in making sure that you are balancing things right. A good sign for yourself to realize you might be lacking taking responsibility is if you are complaining about something a lot. That could be an indicator that you might not be taking responsibility and you haven't communicated something to someone, which you could do, you just haven't done it. Sometimes we are our own worst enemies. We literally create situations for ourselves. We feel powerless when ultimately we've kind of got ourselves into those situations by the lack of responsibility. And I would just really encourage you to go and reflect on different situations in your life, you know, different kind of aspects of your life, maybe health, maybe relationships and friendships, work, all of these different kind of categories, and ask yourself, what part have I got to play in this? What can I do in these situations to make it better? Because there's always something, and we're usually actually the ones in our own way. I hope that leaves you with some thoughts, and I'm really grateful that you watched this, so thank you.